It's the 11th hour, and we must act to provide stable, continuous funding for the agencies and programs tasked with defending our home turf.
This is really amateur hour to the nth degree.
House Appropriations Chair Hal Rogers and Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi both expressing frustration over the DHS funding stalemate, and we're back now with the panel. So, Kathleen, how much of a mess is this DHS deadlock, especially for Republicans, and what do you think of these reports that John Boehner's job might be in jeopardy?
Well, it's a mess because, once again, the Republicans have put themselves in the position of being seen as the obstructionists, the people who can't govern, who can't, contrary to what Scalise just said, move forward. Obviously, his goal and the goal of the Republicans this time around, at least this past week, was simply to get the Senate to vote on something. They wanted to be able to sort of spread the blame around, I think, a little bit. Now, as to Boehner's problems of leadership, I think it's less a problem of his leadership than it is a problem of this 50-person rabble-rousing crowd who are never going to vote with anyone. They're there to vote against. That's what they came to office to do, and that's what they're going to do. They think that when they fail, they want to fight these unwinnable battles. And when they fail to win, such as tying, health care to funding last year, and whenever that was, and now the immigration issue, they can't win these things, and yet when they can't win them, they blame leadership instead of understanding that it's their own amateur hourness that's getting in the way.
All of you rabble-rousers who are indulging in an amateur hour, please send your emails to Kathleen
I
Parker.
think we're already in constant contact.
We're letting everybody talk here. Chuck, I talked with quite a conservative Republican member of Congress this weekend, and he said the problem is we don't know how to surrender. We don't have the votes to force the Democrats and to force the president to roll back the immigration executive order, and the problem is we're just stringing this out for another week. Is that fair?
It's almost like they're bleeding themselves at this point. And the irony is they had such a great off-ramp available when this federal judge essentially stopped the president's immigration action in its tracks. It's not going into effect. It's not happening. And in fact, it's in a bit of limbo while that whole thing goes on. As Senator McConnell perceived immediately, this is the perfect out for the Republicans. And this is just a measure of, I guess the nice way to say it was the highly principled stand of this Freedom Caucus, some might say the utterly lacking in pragmatism stand, is that they won't even take that. And as a result, you have this situation where they're just going to bleed some more and more. People talk about Boehner being thrown out. At a certain point, I wonder why he even wants the job anymore.
I'm kidding.
Just real quickly, you want to say something? Because I want to turn to another subject.
Boehner's best move is to put the full funding bill on the House floor. He didn't put he put a 3-week full funding bill on the House floor.
You don't think there's going to be a revolt?
No, I think some 50 people will be mad as hell, but I actually think he will enhance his chances of surviving as leader. And oh, by the way, let's put America first instead of talking about who to blame.
All right, let's talking about putting America first, I want to turn to the report this week that the Clinton Foundation has been accepting millions of dollars in contributions from foreign countries, including one from Algeria that apparently violated the ethics deal that the Clinton Foundation made with the Obama White House when Hillary Clinton first came into office as Secretary of State. Here's what potential Republican candidate Carly Fiorina had to say about that.
Explain why we should accept that the millions and millions of dollars that have flowed into the Clinton Foundation from foreign governments do not represent a conflict of interest. She tweets about women's rights in this country and takes money from governments that deny women the most basic human rights.
Congresswoman Harman, does that bother you at all? Are you at all troubled by these donations going to the Clinton Foundation?
Yes. There was a process set up. All the other contributions were reviewed, as I understand it. There was transparency. This was an unsolicited contribution of $500,000 at a time when the U.S. was deluged with help for Haiti. I guess it got lost in the system. I think it needs to be explained. I don't understand why the money wasn't returned or in some way after the fact approval wasn't sought, but I assume the foundation will explain it. I just want to add, Chris, that the Wilson Center accepts small amounts of foreign money, but we have board approval and full transparency.
Yeah, but you're not running for president, and that's the question, because these millions of dollars from other, maybe you are running for president, in which case you can make some news.
I am
I think you'd be a
president
good
of the
opponent.
Wilson Center.
But here's the question: Hillary Clinton is going to run for president, and the Clinton Foundation is continuing to accept millions of dollars in donations from countries, a lot of which, like Algeria, like Qatar, have issues with the United States, have human rights problems. Do you think that that should continue on? And aren't they, in a way, trying to buy influence with Hillary Clinton by contributing money to the foundation that has her name on it?
I think the appearance of what is happening is poor, and I think the process that they have, whatever that is, needs to be fully disclosed, and there has to be absolute transparency, and people will make judgments for themselves. But foreign governments giving limited amount of money to groups, if fully disclosed and if approved, I think is certainly in the context of the Wilson Center okay.
Jason, but again, it's a different situation. Let me just ask you this. I mean, a foreign government, any foreign contribution to an American political candidate is forbidden by law. So should it be all right to give money to a foundation that has the candidate's name on it?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but
I'm not asking you as a lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, I think the appearance of impropriety here is everything, and it's coming from liberals who like to lecture us about how money corrupts politics. That, you know, during the midterm elections, any Republican who took money from the Koch brothers was considered bought and paid for. Hillary Clinton is, through her foundation, taking money from Qatar, Algeria, Kuwait. Does that mean she's going to be bought and paid for? I mean, these are the folks who lecture us about how horrible the Citizens United decision was. And then we find out that her foundation is taking this money. And I think the Clinton Foundation is less a charity than a political group, basically a super PAC put in place to help Hillary Clinton politically.
Let me just, Kathleen, you got about a half a minute.
No. All right, well, perception is everything, and that becomes the reality. It is a big problem for Hillary Clinton, and I think one thing that we haven't mentioned is that it cuts to a question of judgment, because all of this controversy could have been preempted had she not insisted, I assume she insisted, on having her name as part of this foundation.
And one last point, in 1996, the Clintons had a big problem with alleged foreign money coming into the DNC and their campaign operation from China, et cetera. This is going to remind everybody of that.
And 1 second, the Clinton Foundation has done a lot of good in the world.
They sure have. That must be said as well.
All right. I love the fact that there were 3 final statements here. Thank you, panel. See you next week.